Hey everybody, Jack here. Did you know that Bayle is a mimic? Not only is he a mimic, but he was specifically created by the Nox to take down the ancient dragons. Before we jump into the theory crafting, if at any point you like this video, consider liking and subscribing. If you get to the end of the video and I've convinced you, consider sharing it with a friend. If you haven't watched any of my videos before, I try to look at the lore from the perspective of a George R. Martin fan. George R. Martin wrote the lore with Hidetaka Miyazaki for Elden Ring. He is the critically acclaimed author of A Song of Ice and Fire, which was adapted into the TV show Game of Thrones, as well as the current ongoing show House of the Dragon. To give you an example of his influence, Bayle the Dread's name comes from Balerion, the Black Dread, one of the largest Targaryen dragons in A Song of Ice and Fire. But that's neither here nor there. If Bayle is a mimic of anything, he's a mimic of Balerion. Before we go into the theory proper, I want to go over two of the most important lore items within Elden Ring that should guide us when trying to understand the story. These are the two items that I use when trying to figure out what is going on. They are the law of causality, which reads, causality is the pull between meanings. It is the connection that forms the relationships of all things. And the law of regression. Regression is the pull of meaning, that all things yearn eternally to converge. These two items tell us that every single event in our story and within the lore are linked together in some cause-effect chain of relation. And with regression, we will be able to find what those cause and effects are by either looking at the end of our story and moving backwards, or that things yearn eternally to converge, that we should be able to see patterns within our story. Law of regression also has another ability. It can heal all negative statuses, can dispel special effects, and it reveals mimicry in all its forms. So, who is Bayle? The ancient dragon priestess Florisax tells us that Bayle is the oldest and the vilest of all dragons. He is the foul traitor who assailed the dragon lord Placidusax and inflict grievous wounds upon each other. So he is the reason why Placidusax is missing 3 of his heads and has to take a nap beyond time. And Placidusax is the reason why Bayle is missing like both of his wings and doesn't have a leg. His bloodline is the Drakes. Those are dragons like Grail, Agheel, Adula, Smaragd. From the ancient dragon Florisax Spirit Ash, we get, long ago, Florisax assumed human form to share dragon communion with the world. Dragon communion was created by the ancient dragons to quell Bayle's bloodline by convincing mortals to hunt the Drakes and consume their hearts for power. Florisax also says something very interesting about Egon. You all know who Egon is. That's where I point at the green screen, and then Egon starts yelling. She says, I remember that name well, the Broken Drake Warrior, driven by bottomless hunger and fiery ambition, precisely what the Dragon Lord envisaged, for men who partake in dragon communion. The mad hunger and fierceness of spirit that only flows from those young and short of sight. He rather reminds me of Bayle, in fact. Such thoughts are unfathomable to ones as old as we are. So driven by bottomless hunger and fiery ambition, the mad hunger and fierceness of the spirit that only those young and short of sight, which are characteristics that remind Florisax of Bayle. Also, both Bayle and Egon are missing at least one leg, and they're both very angry. The best recap that we have on Bayle comes from the Talisman of Dread. It says, Bayle was the foul dragon's name, a terrible harbinger of destruction, whose challenge to the ancient dragon lord ended in grievous mutual injury. So, we also know that Bayle is the oldest of the dragons, but is considered young and short-sighted when compared to the ancient dragons. He is the one who fought the Dragon Lord, and then they injured each other. Okay. Before we continue talking about Bayle, and getting to how he is a mimic, let's get a baseline by looking at who the ancient dragons are. From the Dragon Crest Shield Talisman, the ancient dragons, who ruled in the prehistoric era before the Erd Tree, would protect their lord as a wall of living rock. And from the Old Lord's Talisman, it's a legendary talisman depicting the ancient king whose seat lies at the heart of the storm beyond time. It is said that the ancient royal city of Farum Azula has been slowly crumbling since time immemorial. So, the ancient dragons ruled in a prehistoric era before the Erd Tree, and they would protect their lord as a wall of living rock. And their city is so old that it's been crumbling since before recorded history or memory, etc. In essence, Farum Azula is as old as your mom. From the remembrance of the Dragon Lord, the Dragon Lord whose seat lies at the heart of the storm beyond time is said to have been Elden Lord in an age before the Erd Tree. So, that's more reaffirming that Placidusax and the Ancient Dragons, they are very, very old. Placidusax also has that spiral going on with his head, and the DLC has taught us all about the spiral, but we'll talk about the spiral of causality another time. Looking back at the Dragon Crest Shield Talisman again, we're looking at would protect their lord as a wall of living rock. From Lightning Strike, we have ancestors of the modern dragons. The ancient dragons had scales of gravel stone and wielded lightning as their weapon. The ancient dragon's lightning strike is spoken in legend. Red lightning is the weapon wielded by ancient dragons. From the ancient dragon's smithing stone, the ancient dragon's seat is said to lie beyond time. It is a polished golden gravel stone, a scale of the ancient dragon lord. This stone lightly twists time. And from the dragon scale blade and gravel stone item, we get a weapon made by sharpening gravelstone scale, thought to be the source of the ancient dragon immortality, and a small clump of shard pointed stones found in lands once beset by ancient dragons are said to be the scales of those very beasts. So I gave you a lot of items right there. So to recap what we learned, Placidusax was Elden Lord in a time before the Erd Tree, very long ago. The ancient dragons are made of living rock. Their gravelstone scales are the source of their immortality. Ancient dragons are so old that even their city is older than the memory of time. And ancient dragons wielded red lightning. Ancient stone dragons is a Miyazaki staple. In Dark Souls 1, the everlasting dragons existed before anything else, before life and death and heat and cold, and were immortal due to their stone scales. In an interview, Miyazaki once described the dragons of Dark Souls as mineral-based life forms, only half-living and fundamentally elemental beings. So the point is that ancient dragons are living rocks. That's how old they are. They're as old as the rocks on the earth. So, what about the modern dragons, which are supposed to be Bayle's bloodline? From the Dragon Wound Grease, we get, when the dragons were born from their ancient kin, they lost their stone scales. And remember from Florisax that Bayle is the oldest, most vilest dragon, and his bloodline is that of the Drakes. He is also young and short of sight compared to his ancient dragon counterparts. So from her perspective, Bayle is the first dragon without stone scales, and he betrays the ancient dragons. Again, we have another Dark Souls 1 comparison to Seath the Scaleless. Seath the Scaleless was an everlasting dragon who was born without stone scales of immortality, who betrayed his own kin. He also ain't got no legs. He ain't got no legs, just like Egon, and just like Bayle is missing a leg, and his tail gives you the Moonlight Greatsword. I don't know if that's relevant, but that's what happens. So if anything, Bayle's name is mimicking Balerion the Black Dread, and Bayle is also mimicking Seath the Scaleless. Now, the Nox didn't make Dark Souls 1 or Song of Ice and Fire, but if at anything, Bayle is a mimic of those things, so can't be wrong there. There's actually another set of dragons who don't have stone scales. Do you know who they are? That's right, they're the Dragonkin soldiers of the Nox. From the Frozen Lightning Spear, we have the Dragonkin reborn in the Eternal City, where they knew no true sky, nor true lightning. Instead, ice lightning was their weapon. From the dragon scale blade, we have, alas, the Dragonkin soldiers never attained immortality, and perished as decrepit, pale imitations of their skyborn kin. Ice lightning orbs can be found floating around Shifra River, the consecrated snowfield, and I think in the Cerulean coast. In the consecrated snowfield, we also find spirits of the Dragonkin soldiers. When you get too close to them, they pop out of nowhere and they attack until they disappear. The Nox are chilly beings. They're, they're pretty cold-oriented fellas. From the Night Maidens and Swordstress Puppets, we have these sisters, members of a cold-blooded race. So they're cold-blooded. Cold-blooded animals are very adaptable. They can live in warm environments and cold environments. From the Nox Swordstress Crown, we have long ago, the Nox invoked the ire of the Greater Will, and were banished deep underground. Now they live under a false night sky, in eternal anticipation of their liege, of the coming age of stars, and their Lord of Night. So we know the Nox want an age of stars. The age of stars ending is Ronnie's dark moon ending. And the dark moon is described as cold, dark, it does frost damage. You get the picture. Ice is the Nox thing. They're cold. From the Albinoric ashes, we learn that the Albinorics can spew freezing breath. So the Nox were attempting to make dragons, but they never attained immortality because they couldn't replicate the stone scales, and they couldn't replicate their red lightning. They could only make ice lightning. So just because Bayle doesn't have stone scales, does that make him a Dragonkin? Not quite. We're not there yet. One of the pieces of evidence is their chins. That's right. Bayle and the Nox Dragonkin soldiers have the same square chin. They're very masculine, very alpha male with their stone jaws. So that's just a visual representation going on there. The big one that jumped out to me, this is what blew me away, is when you're fighting the Dragonkin soldier of Noxtella, and you get him into his second phase, he explodes into ice lightning and sprouts wings. When you get Bayle into his second phase, he explodes into fire lightning and sprouts wings. So far, we have the Dragonkin soldier of Noxtella and his square chin explodes into ice lightning and then sprouts wings. Bayle, with his square chin, explodes into fire lightning and grows wings. I don't know if this one's relevant, but we're going to throw it in anyway. From Bayle's flame lightning, channel the form of the dread dragon in the right arm to smash foes with an exposed talon bone, coursing with flame lightning. And when you fight the Dragonkin of Noxtella, it uses lightning in its right hand. So, if anything, they're also both right-handed. So, Bayle has a similar shaped head to the Dragonkin soldiers. Both don't have stone scales of immortality, and both have a similar phase transition. The Dragonkin soldiers' legs are lamed. They can't walk on their legs, they walk on their knees. And Bayle is missing a leg and can't walk properly. The Albinorics as well, first generation Albinorics, the Wolf Riders and then the Old Men, also their legs also don't work. We find Silver Tears and Noxella that are electrified. So we see that the Nox were attempting to use Silver Tears to make, Dragonkin soldiers in some way. The Dragonkin of Noxtella explodes in a fury of ice lightning while sprouting wings, and Bayle explodes in a fury of flame lightning and sprouts wings. But wait, there's more. Before we continue, are you convinced yet? Bayle and the Dragonkin soldiers are looking pretty similar. When we look at Placidusax's Ruin, which is the spell that you can get from his remembrance, it requires 36 faith to cast. That's all you need, 36 faith. If you wanted to do any of the other Dragon Communion incantations, you need to have faith and arcane. For example, Dragonfire requires 15 faith and 12 arcane. I think every single one of the Dragon Communion spells require a little bit more faith than arcane to cast. But Bayle's spells, both of Bayle's spells, require only arcane, and they require a lot of arcane. Bayle's Tyranny, for example, requires 49 arcane. So what's so special about arcane? Well, let's say you don't have enough points in arcane and you can't cast Bayle's Tyranny. Well, you could wear the Albinauric mask. It's a mask made from a largely unaltered hide of a young Albinauric, and it raises arcane. From looking at the Ripple Blade, this sword is modeled after the ripples that are thought to be the origin of their species. Its attack power is greatly increased by one's arcane attribute. Let's say you want a little bit extra arcane. You could wear the Silver Tear mask. Mask fashioned from the corpse of a formless silver tear, supported by its hardened, shed husk, greatly increases arcane, I think by 8. To imitate the imitator is a cunning play indeed. From the Albinauric blood clot, we know that Albinaurics are life forms made by human hands. Thus, many believe them to live impure lives. And from the Silver Tear husk, we have the Silver Tear makes mockery of life, reborn again and again into imitation. Perhaps one day, it will be reborn a lord. Maybe a dragon lord. From the Mimic Tear ashes, Mimic Tears are the result of an attempt by the Eternal City to forge a lord. So, our Bayle's spells, they need arcane. Placiduous Axe just needs faith. Dragon Communion needs faith and arcane. We know that the Nox were attempting to make lords out of Silver Tears, out of Mimic Tear ashes. But what is the smoking gun? It's the Albinauric staff. The Albinaurics harbor a secret. They cast sorcery using their innate arcaneness. So Bayle looks like a Dragonkin soldier. Bayle and the Dragonkin soldiers both don't have Gravelstone scales of immortality. Bayle has a phase transition that is identical to the Dragonkin soldiers, exploding in either fire or ice lightning and sprouting wings. Dragonkin soldiers can't walk. Egon can't walk. Bayle is missing a leg, and 1st Gen Albinaurics can't walk. The Nox were attempting to make a lord from Silver Tears. The Dragon Lord's spell requires only faith to cast. Typical Communion spells require faith and arcane. But Bayle only requires arcane, and the Albinaurics harbor a secret. They cast sorcery using their innate arcaneness. So Bayle has many similarities to the Dragonkin, the man-made Albinaurics, and the Nox goal of forging a lord. But what is a mimic if it doesn't mimic anything? Bayle's boss room also mimics Placiduous Axe's boss room. You can kind of see it looks like it has those pillars and it has like those divots in the ground. So Bayle is also mimicking Seath the Scaleless dragon who betrayed his own and brings about the everlasting dragon's downfall. And his name is a bit of mimicry. Bayle the Dread, Balerion the Black Dread. So if it walks like a mimic, and it talks like a mimic, and it looks like a mimic, hey, must be a mimic. So what makes the difference between Bayle being successful and the Dragonkin soldiers not being successful? Well, if we look at Bayle's heart, it says that it's perfused with a bunch of horns, and it's also engorged, it's enlarged. It looks like perhaps the Nox used some crucible infusing into Silver Tears, maybe, and that's what made this dragon specifically special. We see that Dragon Communion spells allows people to turn into dragons, so it might be the case that the influence of the crucible mixed in with some Silver Tears is what made him successful. He has horns on his face where the Dragonkin soldiers do not, and he has horns in his heart where the other dragons don't. They just have Gravelstone in there. But why? None of this matters unless we answer the why. So Bayle kind of looks like he might be a mimic created by the Nox. He looks like the successful Dragonkin soldier. But why would the Nox want to create a dragon to fight against Placiduous Axe, especially so long ago in the ancient times? Thankfully, the game tells us. From Ancient Dragon's Blessing, we know that each night the priestess offers her own sleep to her lord, and in turn receives power of his favor. She says, "My dear Lord Placiduous Axe, tonight like every night, my solace is yours, May it grant you sleep in your place beyond time. So, after the Dragon Lord Placidusax is maimed by Bayle and is assailed by Bayle, he has to go to sleep. And from the remembrance of the Dragon Lord, we have, once his god was fled, the Lord continued to await its return. Ah, okay. So Bayle is created by the Nox. He attacks the Dragon Lord Placidusax. He gets so messed up, he has to take an eternity nap. I know, you know what that's like. You know, you take a nap at 1 and then you wake up at 9 p.m. And then his god is fled. So it looks like the Nox created a Dragon Lord Pretender to destabilize the ancient dragons in order for Placidusax's god to flee. Now, there's been a lot of speculation to who Placidusax's god was, but thanks to the DLC, we can deduce that his god is most likely an Empyrean. In the final boss fight of the game, when you're fighting Radagon, and then it transitions into the Elden Beast, when you defeat the Elden Beast, it turns back into the Elden Ring, but Radagon is gone, and you get the God Slain banner across the screen. Now, for the longest time, I don't think we could know, was it God Slain for Radagon, or was it God Slain for the Elden Beast? But thanks to the DLC, I think we can deduce that God Slain popped up because Radagon was killed. Because when we defeat Radahn and Miquella, we also get God Slain. And when we kill Meter, the Finger Mother, we only get Legend Felled. So it looks like that the god isn't the Elden Beast, it isn't someone like Meter, and it isn't an outer god like the Twin Bird. It's an Empyrean who's been selected to be elevated to godhood. So if you thought the DLC didn't have any information about the Gloam-eyed Queen, think again. Or better yet, start thinking with mimics. I hope I was able to convince you with the evidence presented that Bayle is a mimic created by the Eternal Cities specifically to get Dragon Lord Placidusax hurt enough that their god would be able to flee. Now, why would that be the case? What goal could they have that they would need Dragon Lord Placidusax's god? Or, as I'm calling them, the Gloam-eyed Queen? Well, you just have to wait for our future videos. This event, the Nox creating a mimic of the Dragon Lord, kicks off the chain of events that eventually lead to the War of the Ancient Dragons, Godwyn's Dragon Cult, and the Night of the Black Knives. It also brings us all the way to our ending and explains all of Elden Ring. If you want to know what else they've done, only a mimic can tell you. So consider liking, commenting, subscribing. You can join our Discord. Tell me if you enjoyed this style of video. Just trying to give you giving you the lore, giving you the evidence straight up. You know, no BS. If you like this video, please consider watching my last video. I put a lot of effort in that one. It's a very different style than this one. It's more of a storytelling, but that one tells us about some mimicry going on, in the Dark Moon. I'm probably gonna have to remake that video so more people watch it. But yeah, that's all that is. Bayle is a mimic. If you think it's just a coincidence that he's so much like a Dragonkin soldier, please let me know why you thought Miyazaki decided to just make him look like a mimic, act like a mimic, and talk like a mimic, because, man, it's just all looking like mimics to me. All right, see you guys.